What if the story of human ancestry in Europe has been told backward? For more than a century, the dominant narrative in anthropology has insisted that modern humans spread across the globe and replaced more primitive cousins like the Neanderthals. But as genetic studies have become more sophisticated and fossil discoveries are re-evaluated in light of new technology, a different, more controversial theory is emerging. Modern Europeans, especially those in the far north, Balts, Finns, Scandinavians, may be more than just distant cousins of Neanderthals. They may be their direct descendants. Are Europeans the true descendants of Neanderthals? This idea isn't just provocative, it may be closer to the truth than many scientists are comfortable admitting. In fact, skull studies show that the supraorbital eminences are strongly developed in the Swedes, Finns and Estonians. Let's begin with the facts. The average European has between 1.5% and 2.5% Neanderthal DNA, but this number only tells part of the story. The amount of DNA inherited isn't as important as what that DNA does. In Europeans, particularly in northern populations, the Neanderthal legacy shows up in traits that are highly visible and biologically significant: pale skin, red or blonde hair, straight or wavy hair textures, green and blue eyes, and even certain immune system strengths and psychological traits like heightened vigilance, pain sensitivity, and a tendency toward social withdrawal. Many of these traits are far more common in Balts and Finns than in Southern Europeans or Middle Easterners. For instance, the gene variants associated with light skin pigmentation, such as SLC24A5 and SLC45A2, and eye color, notably HERC2 and OCA2, have been linked to archaic introgression. That is, they were inherited from Neanderthals. These phenotypes are concentrated in Northern Europe and are nearly absent in other parts of the world. Why is that? The answer may lie in ancient interbreeding, not just a few isolated events, but deep, continuous hybridization between Homo sapiens and Neanderthals over tens of thousands of years. And perhaps in Europe, it was not sapiens who triumphed over Neanderthals, but the Neanderthals who absorbed sapiens and transformed. For decades, textbooks told us that Neanderthals vanished about 40,000 years ago, replaced by modern humans. But this clean-cut story no longer holds up. The fossil record in Europe shows extensive overlap between early Homo sapiens and Neanderthals. In fact, in sites like Grotte Mandrin in France, evidence shows that the two groups alternated occupation over generations, perhaps even centuries. At Mandrin, a tooth from a modern human was found sandwiched between Neanderthal layers dating back more than 50,000 years. This suggests not conquest but coexistence. The Grotte Mandrin Neanderthals, among the most ancient, ultimately disappeared. But other Neanderthal populations, especially in more sheltered or isolated parts of Europe, survived longer and left behind fossils that show signs of being different. Take, for example, La Ferracie and La Chapelle-aux-Saints. These individuals are traditionally called Neanderthals, but they do not fit the brutish stereotype. They were tall, heavy-browed and robust, yes, but they also showed signs of complexity, deliberate burial, tool use, and even possible speech. Some anthropologists now argue that these late Neanderthals were hybrids. And if they were hybrids, they weren't dead ends, they were ancestors. Let's look more closely at some of these fossils. La Chapelle-aux-Saints 1, a nearly complete skeleton found in southwestern France in 1908, was for years misrepresented as stooped and ape-like. In truth, the posture was due to arthritis, and the man likely walked upright. He had a large brain, about 1,620 cubic centimeters, larger than the modern human average, and a powerful frame. La Ferracie 1, another Neanderthal male found in France, was buried carefully in a stone-lined pit. His teeth and skull show a mix of Neanderthal robustness and more modern traits like reduced prognathism and a higher cranial vault. His brain size was also massive, around 1,600 cc. What makes these individuals so important is their date, around 60,000 to 40,000 years ago. These were not archaic Neanderthals like those from Cima de los Huesos in Spain or Krapina in Croatia. They lived in the same window when early modern humans were entering Europe. If interbreeding happened, these were likely the products. and if anyone survived the upheaval of climate change, volcanic winter and disease that followed, it was them. It's possible, even likely, that the ancestors of modern Northern Europeans are descended from these very hybrids. Their genetic legacy, tall, strong, pale-skinned, light-eyed, is still written in the DNA of Balts, Finns, Scandinavians, and some Slavs. The Romans wrote that, with respect to the Finns, they lived in a state of astonishing savageness, their food being wild herbs, their clothing skins, their arrowheads made of bone, and that the children and old people had no other protection from the weather than wattled huts. As late as in the 11th century, the so-termed Jotuni, the most ancient population of Scandinavia, dwelt in the mountains and forests, clad in the skins of animals and uttering sounds more like the cries of wild beasts than human speech. Genes don't lie. Genetics has opened a new window into the past, and it's revealing just how deep the Neanderthal roots go in Northern Europe. One key example is the BNC2 gene, associated with freckling and skin pigmentation. It's strongly linked to Neanderthal DNA and common in Northern Europeans. Another is the POU2F3 gene, which influences hair texture, again, a Neanderthal contribution. Even the MC1R gene, which causes red hair, seems to have an archaic origin. These traits are rare or absent outside of Europe, but there's more. This pattern suggests something striking. Neanderthal genes weren't diluted out over time, they were selected for. In cold, dark, Ice Age Europe, pale skin helped absorb vitamin D in low sunlight environments. Stronger immune systems helped resist cold weather infections, and robust bodies helped endure the bitter cold and hunt large game. In other words, Northern Europeans may not just carry Neanderthal DNA, they may have thrived because of it. Among Europeans, certain populations stand out. Genetic studies consistently show that Finns and Balts, Latvians, Lithuanians, Estonians are genetic outliers. They carry unique variants not widely shared even with other Europeans. Some of this is due to isolation, but some may be deeper, a remnant of Ice Age survival and ancient ancestry. Finns, in particular, show high frequencies of Neanderthal-derived traits and also have elevated proportions of Uralic-specific and archaic genetic components. Their mitochondrial haplogroups, such as U5 and V, are among the oldest in Europe and are also found in ancient hunter-gatherers who lived during and shortly after the Ice Age. These were not recent arrivals from the south. They were Ice Age survivors. Some geneticists have even noted that the Finnic peoples carry unique sequences that may not just come from Neanderthals, but from hybrids who evolved separately in northern refuges during the coldest periods of the Pleistocene. In other words, they may be among the least admixed modern humans in Europe, not the most. Rather than being pure Homo sapiens, they may be more Neanderthal than anyone else alive. Picture a frostbitten Europe, where Neanderthals with their rugged faces and sturdy bodies roamed for nearly 400,000 years, perfectly adapted to a world of ice and shadow. Now imagine early modern humans meeting these natives in a dance of survival and intimacy, their unions forging a new kind of human, hybrids who carried the best of both worlds. Fast forward to today, and Northern Europeans, especially Finns and Baltic peoples, stand out with their pale skin, blue eyes and robust builds, traits that echo those ancient hybrids. In this view, Europeans, particularly Northern Europeans like the Finns and Balts, are descendants of Neanderthal Homo sapiens hybrids, such as those represented by fossils like La Chapelle aux Saints and La Ferracie, dating back to around 60,000 years ago. These hybrids, unlike archaic Neanderthals like the Grot Mandarin population that went extinct, laid the foundation for modern Europeans, their unique genetic phenotypes preserved in Europe's cold, isolated north. Through genetic, fossil and environmental evidence, we'll uncover a deep ancestry that ties Europeans to these early hybrids, challenging the idea that their heritage is a recent footnote in human history. Neanderthals weren't just Europe's first residents, they were its soul for nearly 400,000 years, from about 400,000 to 40,000 years ago. They thrived in a brutal landscape of glaciers and tundra, hunting bison with stone-tipped spears and huddling in caves to survive bitter winters. Their bodies were built for this world. Light skin to capture scarce sunlight, broad noses to warm icy air, and stocky frames to conserve heat. But around 100,000 years ago, something remarkable happened. Early modern humans began appearing in Neanderthal territories, possibly during the warm, last interglacial period. Instead of clashing, they mingled, creating hybrid offspring who carried Neanderthal and Homo sapiens traits. These hybrids, represented by fossils like La Chapelle-aux-Saints and La Ferracie, weren't just a fleeting experiment. They became the ancestors of modern Europeans, their genes shaping the very features that define northern Europeans today. Meanwhile, archaic Neanderthals, like the isolated Grotta Mandarin population, left no lasting mark, their lineages fading into extinction. Let's explore how these hybrids, not the archaic holdouts, forged a 100,000-year legacy for Europeans. The bones of Europe tell a story of blending, not replacement. Later Neanderthals, dated between 70,000 and 40,000 years ago, show signs of Homo sapiens influence, suggesting they were hybrids. These fossils contrast sharply with archaic Neanderthals, like the Grotta Mandarin individual known as Thorin, who remained pure but vanished. Europe's geography is a natural vault, with oceans to the west and south, Arctic ice to the north, and mountains like the Alps splitting the interior. During glacial periods, ice sheets made northern Europe a fortress, isolating populations. Finns in their northeastern corner and Balts, ringed by seas and forests, were especially cut off, their genes preserved like relics. This isolation was key. When Homo sapiens interbred with Neanderthals, their hybrid descendants faced less mixing than in Asia, where migrations across vast plains diluted Neanderthal genes. Finns, with their history of genetic bottlenecks, concentrated Neanderthal alleles. Balts, similarly isolated, show high Neanderthal trait expression, their wide faces a testament to this seclusion. Europe's north, especially Finland and the Baltics, was a genetic time capsule for hybrid traits. The fossil record is a family album, showing how Neanderthal Homo sapiens hybrids became Europeans. Early hybrids like Skull and Kafza, 120,000, 90,000 years ago, were Homo sapiens with Neanderthal-like robusticity, suggesting interbreeding in the Levant during the last interglacial. These hybrids likely moved into Europe, where later Neanderthals like La Chapelle and La Ferracie, 50,000 years ago, show Homo sapiens-like traits, higher foreheads, smaller noses, hinting at their mixed blood. Compare this to Thorin from Grotta Mandarin, a pure Neanderthal from the same period. Thorin's inbred genome and classic Neanderthal skull, no modern traits, show a lineage that didn't mix and didn't survive. Vindiger and Saint-Césaire, on the other hand, have rounder skulls and Homo sapiens-like features, with Vindiger's DNA revealing Homo sapiens alleles. The OAC1 fossil, 40,000 years ago, a Homo sapiens with 6-9% Neanderthal DNA, seals the deal, its robust jaw echoing Neanderthal ancestry. These fossils trace a 100,000-year chain from early hybrids in the Levant to late Neanderthal hybrids in Europe, culminating in modern Europeans. Finns and Balts, with their Neanderthal-like phenotypes, are the endpoint. Their traits are direct legacy of hybrids like La Chapelle, not extinct archaics like Thorin. Some claim European traits like light skin and blue eyes are recent, emerging only 10,000, 5,000 years ago, with farming or post-glacial shifts. This narrative, common in media, suggests Europeans are newcomers to their own features, not ancient descendants. But the evidence tells a different story, rooted in Neanderthal hybrids. Neanderthals had light skin and variable hair, eye colours, as shown by MC1R and OCA2 variants in fossils. The SLC24, a 5 gene nearly universal in Finns, has Neanderthal roots and appeared in European hunter-gatherers 20,000 years ago. Blue-eye genes show up in similar ancient DNA, tied to Neanderthal ancestry from interbreeding 50,000 years ago. These traits, carried by hybrid ancestors like La Ferracie, were refined over 100,000 years, not born yesterday. The recent story focuses on Neolithic gene sweeps, but it ignores the Neanderthal baseline. Hybrids from 100,000 years ago brought these alleles to Europe, and Northern Europe's climate kept them dominant. Finns and Balts, with their Arctic isolation, preserved this legacy. Their pale faces a direct link to hybrid Neanderthals, not a recent fluke. Finns and Baltic peoples, Estonians, Latvians, Lithuanians, are the truest descendants of Neanderthal hybrids. Their sub-Arctic home, with its brutal winters and dim sunlight, mirrors the Neanderthal world, favouring traits like light skin and stocky builds. Finland's genetic history, marked by bottlenecks, amplified Neanderthal alleles. Balts, isolated by seas and forests, show similar patterns, their wide faces and fair skin a hybrid hallmark. Southern Europeans, like Italians, have darker skin and slimmer builds, diluted by Mediterranean climates and Neolithic migrations. Eastern Europeans, like Russians, show some Neanderthal traits, but were mixed with steppe nomads. Finns and Balts, in their frozen north, stayed closest to the hybrid blueprint, their bodies a living echo of La Chapelle and La Ferrassie. Skeptics might argue that Neanderthal DNA is too small for descent, but these alleles shape key traits, light skin, robust faces, that define Finns and Balts. It's quality, not quantity, like a pinch of spice transforming a dish. Others claim Homo sapiens' African origin overshadows Neanderthal ancestry. True, but hybrids like La Ferrassie added a European layer, making Finns distinct from their African roots. Some say Neanderthals went extinct, not ancestral. But hybrids didn't. They merged, as fossils like Vindiger show, their genes living in every European. Finally, the recent trait narrative falls apart when you see Neanderthal alleles in 100,000-year-old hybrids carried forward by Finns and Balts in an unbroken line. This isn't just science, it's identity. For 100,000 years, from the last interglacial to today, Europe has been home to Neanderthal Homo sapiens hybrids, their legacy etched in the faces of Finns and Balts. Light skin, blonde hair, blue eyes, broad faces, stocky builds, these are the gifts of ancestors like La Chapelle, preserved in a land of ice and shadow. Archaic Neanderthals like Thorin faded, but hybrids thrived, their descendants shaping Europe's story. Northern Europeans carry this heritage in every step through snowy forests, their features a bridge to a 100,000-year past. Recognizing this deep ancestry isn't just about history. It's about honoring a people forged by the cold, bound to their continent by the blood of their hybrid kin. From the warm caves of the last interglacial to the icy streets of modern Tallinn, a 100,000-year thread ties Europeans to their Neanderthal hybrid ancestors. Northern Europeans, especially Finns and Balts, are the descendants of these hybrids. Fossils like La Chapelle aux Saints and La Ferrassie, whose light skin, robust faces and stocky builds live on in their genes. Genetic evidence confirms this, showing Neanderthal alleles shaping Northern European phenotypes. Fossils trace a hybrid lineage from 100,000 years ago, unlike extinct archaic Neanderthals like Thorin's Grotta Mandrin group. Europe's cold north and isolation preserved these traits, making Finns and Balts the truest heirs. This deep ancestry challenges shallow narratives, affirming a European identity rooted in the ancient unions of Neanderthals and Homo sapiens. So if the Neanderthal bloodline survived in the north, what happened in the south? Why did early Neanderthal populations like those at Grotta Mandrin vanish? The answer may lie in geography, climate and contact. Southern Neanderthals were among the first to encounter migrating Homo sapiens from the Levant. These populations had evolved under different pressures, in warmer climates, with different pathogens and diets. When they arrived in Europe, they brought cultural innovations like blade tools and symbolic behavior, but also new diseases and competition for resources. Mandrin and other southern Neanderthals were caught at the crossroads. They may have been outcompeted in some areas or succumbed to infections, but those in more remote northern regions had time to adapt. They may have interbred with early sapiens before the southern extinction wave began, and then retreated into forests, mountains and tundra. By the time the last glaciers retreated, it was their descendants who re-emerged. This theory challenges the idea that Homo sapiens simply replaced everyone else. Instead, it suggests that in places like Europe, the dominant force wasn't replacement. It was mixture, hybrid vigor and survival. To recap, the idea that modern Europeans are the result of Neanderthal-sapiens hybrids, especially from lineages like La Ferracie and La Chapelle, helps explain many mysteries. It explains why Europeans differ so much in appearance from populations in Africa and East Asia. It explains why the oldest European genomes, like those from Kostenki, Sungir and Goyet, already show signs of Neanderthal ancestry that shaped key phenotypes. And it explains why so many Ice Age fossils don't look purely modern, but instead show strong archaic features, thick brow ridges, large noses and robust jaws. Even today, these traits persist, not in everyone, but more often in Northern Europe. The wide nasal bridges, strong jawlines, thick skull bones, and deep-set eyes seen in many Balts, Scandinavians and Finns aren't just random variation, they're ancestral echoes. For decades, Neanderthals were portrayed as slow, dumb and doomed, but this image is changing fast. We now know they made jewelry, used fire, buried their dead, and perhaps even sang or used language. In many ways, they were not very different from early modern humans. But what if they didn't go extinct at all? What if they became us? Especially in Northern Europe, the line between Homo sapiens and Homo neanderthalensis may not be a line at all. It may be a deep, tangled root system, a blend of species, cultures and adaptations that gave rise to something new, not a replacement. But why does this matter? Because science should be based on evidence, not ideology. By acknowledging the true diversity of Neanderthals and their contributions to modern humans, we gain a clearer and more accurate picture of our past. The Neanderthal legacy is not one of extinction, but of integration, adaptation and survival. And that is a story worth telling. Indeed, the ancient blood that runs through these distant ancestors has more in common with us than we once thought possible. Genetic studies have consistently shown that Neanderthals carried alleles for light eye color, particularly blue eyes. The OCA2 gene, which is critical in melanin production in the iris, contains Neanderthal variants that have been linked to lighter pigmentation in modern Europeans. One allele, associated with blue eye color, has been found in European and Central Asian hunter-gatherers, dating back at least 30,000 years. According to one frequently cited report, blue eye color in humans may be caused by a perfectly associated founder mutation in a regulatory element located within the HERC2 gene that inhibits OCA2 expression. This mutation for light-colored eyes most likely originated in the Caucasus region around 42,000 years ago. This overlaps with a recent study that found that modern humans and Neanderthals overlapped and interbred in the region between 47,000 years ago and lasting nearly 7,000 years until the Neanderthals went extinct. Think about that. 7,000 years of interbreeding and genetic mixing. So why does the myth persist? The claim that Neanderthals could not have had blue eyes is based on outdated or selective genetic studies that ignore newer evidence from ancient DNA. Institutions that support the replacement hypothesis often emphasize findings that reinforce the idea of a homogeneous Neanderthal ancestry while downplaying studies showing early genetic variation. The spread of these genetic traits in modern humans implies that they were advantageous and selected for in northern latitudes, where lighter hair and skin provided benefits in vitamin D synthesis. The idea that Neanderthals only had dark hair is not only scientifically inaccurate, but also a politically motivated narrative designed to minimize their contributions to modern European populations. The claim that Neanderthals did not have light pigmentation is another distortion of the genetic evidence. While early Homo sapiens arriving from more tropical locales had darker skin, Neanderthals had already been adapting to European environments for over 300,000 years. The need for efficient vitamin D production in low UV environments led to the selection of lighter skin tones among Neanderthals long before modern humans arrived. It is critical to understand that skin, eye and hair color are polygenic traits, which means they are influenced by more than one gene. The impact of Neanderthal genes must be considered in the context of natural selection, adaptation, and the blending of various genetic contributions over millennia. For example, the admixture of Neanderthal genes with those of early modern humans may have helped populations adapt to Europe's lower levels of sunlight by influencing traits like skin color. Human eye color is primarily determined by the interaction of several genes, the most important of which are OCA2 and HERC2. Neanderthals, like early modern humans, are thought to have had a wide range of eye colors, including lighter shades like blue and green. When a genetic trait becomes common in a population, and when it first evolved, takes many, many generations. This gene was prevalent in the Caucasus region at the time, and spread westward into Europe around 20,000 years ago, and became common around 10,000 years ago. For example, according to a recent study, another Neanderthal haplotype encompassing the OCA2 gene, found at high frequency in East Asians and Europeans, suggests that Neanderthal DNA played a major role in the depigmentation of early Homo sapiens in Eurasia. If Neanderthals had only dark pigmentation, why would modern humans have inherited light skin-related alleles from them? The reality is that Neanderthals had a range of pigmentation, just as modern Europeans do today, and had light skin adapted for northern climates. Indeed, contrary to popular media portrayal, Neanderthals exhibited variation in genes related to hair, skin, and eye pigmentation. Furthermore, some of that variation has been passed down to modern human populations, with different variants being more or less common in different populations. Interestingly, more of the introgressed variants are associated with lighter pigmentation than darker pigmentation. Lighter pigmentation makes sense for them, just as it does for modern humans. Surprisingly, evidence suggests that up to 16 different genes may be responsible for human eye color. But the main two genes associated with eye color variation are OCA2 and HERC2, both of which are located on chromosome 15. Specifically, a Neanderthal introgressed allele associated with blue iris pigmentation and blonde and red hair color was under selection in modern human populations. Today, we know of over 100 variants linked to pigmentation variation in living humans. Fewer than 10 of these are known for Neanderthals, and this limited current knowledge may not reflect the full picture of Neanderthals. Nonetheless, two Neanderthal-introduced haplotypes involved in pigmentation are now very common in European populations, indicating a history of natural selection. Accepting that Neanderthals had blue eyes, red or blonde hair, and light skin challenges the notion that these traits emerged only after modern humans arrived in Europe. It suggests that some aspects of European identity are rooted in a deeper indigenous ancestry going back hundreds of thousands of years, rather than being purely a product of later migration. One of these haplotypes includes the gene OCA2, which is known to have several variants in living people that affect skin and eye pigmentation. It is most commonly cited as a genetic link to blue versus brown eyes. This Neanderthal haplotype, which spans OCA2, is an excellent example of how difficult it can be to determine the functional significance of introgressed haplotypes. This haplotype contains no coding variants, so if there are functional differences between this haplotype and others, they must be due to gene regulation rather than genetic structure. The Neanderthal haplotype contains dozens of gene variants, but only one variant was identified in previous pigmentation studies. This variant has a statistically significant but small effect on eye and hair color in European ancestry samples. But because it does not strongly predict eye or skin pigmentation, it is unclear whether another linked variant is responsible for the association with pigmentation. Thus, the findings support the hypothesis of recurrent positive selection acting on multiple variants of OCA2, some of which evolved in modern humans and others inherited through hybridization with Neanderthals. Genome-wide studies and gene variant analyses have been critical in determining which Neanderthal gene variants are still present in modern human populations. For example, gene variants associated with Neanderthal introgression have been linked to skin pigmentation traits, allowing us to better understand how these ancient genes influence the appearance of modern Europeans. In fact, the misconception that Neanderthals had exclusively dark or brown pigmentation is contradicted by multiple genetic analyses. The MC1R gene, which regulates pigmentation in hair and skin, has Neanderthal variants that lead to red and blonde hair in modern humans. Research on Neanderthal DNA has identified alleles associated with red hair in some specimens, suggesting that at least some Neanderthals had lighter hair. Neanderthal DNA studies have revealed other variants in genes associated with skin pigmentation that may have been passed down to modern Europeans. MC1R is an important gene that plays a role in melanin production. Some Neanderthal MC1R gene variants appear to have influenced differences in skin tone among modern humans, favoring lighter skin. However, the precise impact is unknown because modern European skin color is also influenced by natural selection and the interactions of multiple genetic factors over time. Indeed, variants associated with hair color in genes such as MC1R and TYRP1 suggest Neanderthal admixture. Alleles responsible for red hair and lighter hair have been linked to Neanderthal gene flow. The presence of these alleles in some modern human populations suggests that these ancient interactions provided the genetic basis for lighter and more diverse hair color in Europe, as well as an increased likelihood of body hair. According to yet another study, the Neanderthal-derived variant of BNC2 gene on chromosome 9 is strongly linked to lighter skin pigmentation, freckling and reduced tanning ability in Europeans. Approximately 70% of Europeans possess the Neanderthal variant of the BNC2 gene. This gene is believed to modulate the expression of other pigmentation-related genes, including TYR, on chromosome 11, which is crucial for melanin synthesis. The evidence is clear. Genetic research has shown that they carried alleles for blue eyes, red and blonde hair, and lighter skin, all of which were passed on to modern human populations. The persistence of myths about Neanderthal pigmentation is not based on science, but rather on a broader attempt to control historical narratives and reinforce specific models of human evolution. But why the misleading information about Neanderthal pigmentation studies?